Dear students, today we are going to study about the reproductive cycles and the hormonal control of reproductive cycle. In this class, we will be discussing about the reproductive cycles. All sexually reproducing organisms exhibit the phenomenon of reproductive cycles. And this reproductive cycles, it is much more distinct in the case of mammals than in the case of other vertebrates. And this reproductive cycle, it is more distinct in the case of female mammals. And all mammals, they show a periodic, a brief period of intense sexual activity during a particular season of the year. And during other periods of the year, they remain sexually inactive, or there is no profound sexual activity during other periods of the year. And so there are the variations in the sexual behavior at different times of the year in the life of mammals. And the brief period of sexual activity in males is called rutting season. And the reproductive cycle, it is more prominent in the case of female mammals. That is, female mammals exhibit cyclic and rhythmic changes in sexual behavior. And this cyclic and rhythmic changes in sexual behavior in the case of female mammals is generally called reproductive cycles. And for primate and non-primate mammals, there are different reproductive cycles, and the reproductive cycle of non-primate female is called estrous cycle, and the reproductive cycle of primate female is called menstrual cycle. We will be discussing about the reproductive cycle of primate females. And the reproductive cycle of primate females begin at the time of puberty. And the reproductive organs of primate females include the ovaries and the uterus, and cyclic and rhythmic changes are occurring in both the ovaries and the uterus during the sexual period in the life of the primate female. And the cyclic changes which occur in the ovaries, they are called it is called the ovarian cycle, and monthly series of events are occurring in the ovaries, which is related to the maturation and release of ovum. And similarly, cyclic changes occur in the uterine wall of the female and a female primate mammal, and it is called the uterine cycle or the menstrual cycle. And both these cyclic changes occur in the ovary and the uterus of a non-pregnant female. And when a female becomes pregnant, these cycles are arrested during the gestational period. And these two cycles, the ovarian cycle and the uterine cycle, they work in coordination. First, let us see the ovarian cycle. The ovarian cycle is having three phases, that is follicular phase, ovulatory phase, and luteal phase. This is the picture showing the various changes occurring in the ovarian cycle. First phase of the ovarian cycle is the follicular phase, and the follicular phase lasts from the day 1 of menstruation to the day 14. The day 14 is the day on which ovulation occurs. So follicular phase lasts from day 1 to day 14, and during this period the ovarian follicles are formed. Here you can see the cells in the ovaries, they are assembled to form groups which are called ovarian follicles. So these groups of cells, they are called ovarian follicles. First, when they are formed, they are called primary follicles. And as time proceeds, these primary follicles, here you can see they undergo rapid proliferation, and the number of cells increase, and the ovarian follicle also increase in size. And one of the ovarian follicular cell is developing as the oocyte. And the follicle is increasing in size, and the ovum is also getting matured. Here you can see the mature ovarian follicle, which is called the Graphene Follicle. So the follicular phase includes the formation of ovarian follicles and the maturation of Graphene follicles and the formation of the mature ovum. So it lasts up to the day 14. And on day 14, the mature ovum is released from the Graphene follicle. The Graphene follicle is ascending to the surface of the ovary, and it is getting ruptured, and the mature ovum is released. And this process of release of mature ovum from from the graphene follicle is called ovulation, and this occurs on day 14, and this phase during which the ovulation occurs is called the ovulatory phase. And once ovum is released, the remaining of the graphene follicle, it is now getting filled with blood, and this follicle with the blood clot inside is called the corpus hemorrhagicum. So during the next phase, that is the luteal phase, it is lasting from day 15 to day 28. The first change is the formation of the corpus hemorrhagicum, that is the ruptured graphene follicle is getting filled with blood, and a blood clot is formed, and the graphene follicle with the clot inside, it is called the corpus hemorrhagicum. Then after that, the clot is replaced. It is then removed, and the follicle is now getting transformed into a yellow colored endocrine gland, which is called the corpus luteum. Here you can see the development of the corpus luteum. Here this is the fully functional corpus luteum, and this corpus luteum is functioning like an endocrine gland which is secreting the hormone progesterone. So the corpus luteum will be maintained if the female becomes pregnant. If pregnancy occurs, this corpus luteum will be maintained throughout the period of gestation. And if pregnancy will not occur, this corpus luteum is undergoing degeneration, and it is converted to a fibrous mass of tissue which is called corpus albicans. So the formation of corpus hemorrhagicum, the formation of corpus luteum, and the degeneration of corpus luteum into corpus albicans, these are the changes which are taking place during the third phase of ovarian cycle, that is the luteal phase. So the ovarian cycle is having three phases: follicular phase, during which the primary ovarian follicles are formed, they are getting matured, and they are getting transformed into the mature graphene follicle, and the mature graphene follicle is having the ovum inside, and this mature ovum is released on day 14 by the process called ovulation, and this occurs during the ovulatory phase. And after that, the remaining graphene follicle is getting filled with, the ruptured graphene follicle is getting filled with blood, and it is called the corpus hemorrhagicum. And after that, this ruptured graphene follicle, the corpus hemorrhagicum, is getting converted to the endocrine gland, that is the corpus luteum. And if pregnancy occurs, corpus luteum will be maintained, and otherwise it is degenerated into corpus albicans. Next is the uterine cycle or the menstrual cycle. This cycle is lasting for 28 days, and it is repeated at 28 days interval. And this uterine cycle or the menstrual cycle is working in coordination with the ovarian cycle. And this uterine cycle is having four phases: menstrual phase, pre-ovulatory phase or proliferative phase, post-ovulatory phase or secretory phase, and pre-menstrual phase. First, let us see the different phases of menstrual cycle. First is the menstrual phase. Menstrual phase lasts from day 1 to day 5 of the menstrual cycle. During menstruation, you know that the functionalis layer of the uterine endometrium, it is sloughed off. The uterine endometrium is the inner lining of the uterine wall, and it is having two layers, the basal layer and the functionalis layer. The functionalis layer is sloughed off during this menstrual phase, and blood is discharged. Blood, mucus, and the degenerated endometrial tissue, it is discharged through the uterine cervix, and this discharge is called discharge of blood and endometrial tissue. It is called menses or menstruation. And next phase is the pre-ovulatory phase or the proliferative phase, and it lasts from day 6 to day 14, and it is the stage between menstruation and ovulation. On day 5, menstruation is over, and after that the pre-ovulatory phase is starting. So it is the stage between menstruation and ovulation. Ovulation is the release of ovum. And during this period, the endometrium, which was sloughed off, it is formed new. A new endometrial layer is formed by the mitotic proliferation of the cells in the uterine wall. So a new functionalis layer, stratum functionalis, is formed, and the thickness of the endometrial wall increases about 5 to 6 folds. Then the next phase, that is the post-ovulatory phase or the secretory phase, it lasts from day 14 to day 26. So on day 14, ovulation occurs in the ovary. That is why it is called post-ovulatory phase. And this stage occurs between the ovulation and the onset of menstruation. Post-ovulatory phase or the secretory phase is the stage between ovulation and onset of menstruation. So during this period, the endometrium undergoes further thickening. Endometrium is the layer where the fertilized egg is coming and getting attached. The ovum, if it is getting fertilized, it will be converted to the zygote, and the zygote will undergo development to form the embryo. And the further development of the embryo will occur only if it is getting implanted, it is getting nutrients. And for getting nutrients, it has to establish a physiological connection with the maternal body, and it is made possible through implantation. So implantation is the attachment of the embryo to the wall of the uterus of the mother. And for that, the endometrium has to become sufficiently thick, and it should be richly vascularized. So that is the change which is taking place during the post-ovulatory phase or the secretory phase. So the endometrium becomes further thickened to receive the fertilized egg, and vascularization of the endometrium occurs. That is, the endometrium becomes richly supplied with blood capillaries, and endometrial glands also will get developed, and it is also getting accumulated with glycogen. And now the endometrium becomes a soft, wet, nutritious bed which is ideal for the implantation of the embryo. And the last phase of the menstrual cycle is the premenstrual phase, and it lasts from day 26 to day 28. And in the absence of pregnancy, the capillaries in the wall of the uterus, that is the endometrial arteries, they will undergo spasmodic contraction. That is, they will undergo contraction intermittently, and this will block the blood supply to the wall of the endometrium, and the endometrial tissue will be now deprived of nutrients, and this condition is called ischemia. And this will lead to the degeneration of the endometrial tissues, which is called tissue necrosis. And as a result, the blood capillaries will degenerate, and blood will get accumulated as pools in the functionalis layer of the endometrium. And finally, the functionalis layer will get sloughed off from the uterine wall, and it will mix with blood and glandular secretions and will form the menstrual fluid and will flow out of the body through the uterine cervix. And the blood is not getting clotted because of the presence of fibrinolysin in the menstrual fluid. Here you can see the various phases. This is the pictorial representation of the various phases of the uterine cycle. So in the from day 1 to day 5, you can see the endometrial wall, the functionalis layer of the wall is getting sloughed off, and it is flowing as the flowing out of the body as the menstrual fluid. And after that, from day 6 to day 14, that is the proliferative phase, during this phase a new functionalis layer is formed, and simultaneous with that, in the ovary, the ovarian follicles are also getting formed, and the mature graphene follicle is formed. On day 14, ovulation occurs in the ovary, and after that, in the uterine wall, there is the secretory phase. Further thickening of the endometrial wall occurs, and formation of blood capillaries and accumulation of glycogen occurs in the endometrial wall. And after that, on day 26, since fertilization has not occurred, there is no embryo for implantation, and as a result, the endometrial wall is undergoing tissue necrosis and degeneration. And on day 28, after day 28, menstruation will occur. And menarche is the first menstruation that occurs during the life period of a female primate mammal, and the last menstruation in the life period of the female primate is called the menopause. So the hormonal control of menstrual cycle, hormonal control of female reproductive cycle will be discussed in the next class. Thank you.